We're live. Here we go. Welcome to my house. Welcome to my house. Here we go. And we're live.
Welcome.
Welcome one, welcome all. Just waiting to get some more viewers here. See some likes going across the screen.
Show us some love.
Especially with this song. How do you not show us love with this song?
Rocking the Locker Room Talk soccer jersey.
Yeah.
Stole it from Nick Barra.
Little NYC footy action in there.
Yeah.
In case you want to play in a soccer league in New York City, you can join NYC footy for a good time.
Mm-hmm. Wear these awesome jerseys.
Yep. Only if you join Locker Room Talk's team, though.
Yeah.
Then you get the really
These
cool
are
ones.
exclusive.
Yes, exclusive Locker Room Talk NYC footy jerseys. All right, so I'm going to sadly turn off Flo Rida. Great song, though. And today we are here to talk to you about how to make the best out of your recruiting trip. So if you are going on to a recruiting trip and you don't know what you are going to do and you're a little confused about the whole process,
You've come to the right place.
correct. You came to the right place.
Yeah.
By popular demand and suggestions, this was the topic that was requested for us, and we're going to get started and kind of inform you guys about the whole recruiting process.
Yeah.
Sorry. So basically, recruiting trips serve the purpose for you to understand what you like about a school, what you don't like about a school, a team, a coach, and vice versa. So when you go and visit, you'll be able to interact with the team and kind of understand, what their team culture is like, if they like to go out, if they like to do a lot of group activities, if they like to go bowling, how their whole dynamic is in the locker room, and so on and so forth. And we're going to start off by kind of letting you guys understand why we are talking about this topic outside of the requests. We have a recruiting horror story to start with, and this is a situation where it wasn't ideal for this recruit on his trip.
Yeah, so as Keirsten mentioned, we're going to start off with a little bit of a horror story if you want. This is a blog up on our website, lockerroomtalk.com. Head over there, and the title of this blog is Recruiting Horror Stories, My Name is Not Jason. So for this one, we talked to an athlete who plays lacrosse, and he was going on a visit to a NESCAC school. And, as most athletes probably are heading into a recruiting visit, he was a little bit nervous, didn't know what to expect. And when he got there, he was talking to the coach, met with him, and the coach kept referring to him as Jason, except his name wasn't Jason, hence the blog title. But the athlete said that happened 5 or 6 times. He wasn't really sure why. He kept correcting him, and the coach kept apologizing, but, that's never an ideal situation. So it didn't get off to a good start. And then he met his host, a freshman on the team at the time, who was supposed to, as Keirsten said, show him around, show him what being on the team is all about. Took him to the dining hall for dinner, and he said that at one point his host said to him that, I have to go run and do something. Here's my friend who happened to be on the hockey team. Here's my number, and, once I finish this, I'll meet up with you guys, whatever you're doing, and we'll hang out. So next thing you know, a couple hours pass by, he hasn't heard from his host, and he ends up not seeing his host again for the rest of the night. Didn't meet a single player on the lacrosse team other than his host for those few minutes at the dining hall, and he hung out with the hockey team the entire night. So needless to say, he did not go to that school. And so as Keirsten mentioned before, it's a recruiting visit's a way to see if you fit in with a team or a school, if it's the right fit for you. And clearly this was an example of, while it wasn't the best situation for the kid and he probably was kind of miserable during it, it let him know, like, all right, this isn't the school for me. So he crossed that off his list, which is, sometimes better to have a bad experience, get it out of the way early than, go to that school and then a year later, 2 years later say, oh, maybe this wasn't the right fit for me.
Seems like Jason came across this series of unfortunate events.
Yes.
Get it? I've been waiting
Poor
to say
Jason.
that one.
Poor Jason.
Poor Jason. Yeah, so I mean, you'll hear a lot of different situations of people going to different schools and having bad experiences or great experiences. But as Nick said, that's the whole purpose of the recruiting trip. You want to make sure that you and the school are both equal fit. So our first topic, we're going to talk about 3 topics today. The topics are being prepared, asking questions, and doing your research. So we're first going to get into being prepared. And this is a very broad topic. There are many different things that you can take away from this. I would say at its most basic, being prepared for your recruiting trip to me would be making sure that you have the right amount of clothes, making sure you bring a toothbrush and toothpaste. Speaking from a host perspective, which I've been a host many times, it's a little frustrating when you have so many recruits coming through your dorm room and they're not prepared and you have to lend them your toothpaste. Yeah. Don't lend your toothbrush out. But like providing those necessities to one athlete is okay, but when you have 15 girls visiting you a season, then it could get a little annoying from the host perspective. So be prepared for all types of weather. We had one girl who came. The forecast was supposed to be raining, and she came to the game, and it rained, and she didn't have an umbrella or a raincoat, and then we had to basically run around and try and find her an umbrella or raincoat to make sure that she viewed the game okay and was obviously not getting soaking wet during the whole game. So just little things like that are super important. Also, make sure that you bring a sleeping bag or a pillow, or just ask where you're going to be sleeping. A lot of times people in dorm rooms don't have an extra bed laying around, so you're going to be sleeping on the floor. Hopefully maybe they have some sort of couch or something which you can use, which would be beneficial to you. But in my experience, whenever I visited, I was crashing on the floor.
Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah. So
a few nights on the floor.
Yep. Nothing.
Not the worst thing,
No, unlike a few nights on the floor. Yeah. And then another thing that you need to be prepared for is certain social situations. It could be anything from going bowling with the team to, a lot of times people will take their recruits out to parties, dealing with drinking situations, make sure that you have that conversation with your parents ahead of time and just let them know that you are going to visit the college, obviously, but also how you can handle yourself to make sure that you are safe and also that you're not making any bad decisions, because as you'll see in a little bit, there are a lot of situations where you don't want to be that person that you will be remembered for the rest of your life. I know we both have some stories where recruits ended up showing up to schools and did some things that weren't great, and then they were remembered that way.
Right.
Especially if they end up going to this school, then you kind of have that label already, which isn't great. So go ahead, I'll let you take over.
Going off of what Keirsten said, recruiting visits are usually the first time that you get to meet the team, get to know what they're like away from the coach, away from the field. And so there's another blog up on our site called Recruiting Horror Stories, A Disappearing Recruit. And so this is coming from the host perspective, this blog. And basically we were talking to the host, and they had a recruit come in, and right away they kind of felt that something was a little off about her, and they started to drink. They were getting ready to go out to a party, and out of nowhere, the recruit started bragging about how much she can drink and started, to pressure them into taking shots, and which is kind of just a weird dynamic to do to anyone, let alone, your host. And so then they went to the party, ended up losing her a couple times, couldn't find her, found her, throughout the party. Then the cops came to break it up, but at that point they didn't know where she was, and when they found her, she was complaining how they had to leave. She didn't think it was fair, even though the cops were there. And so, they ended up leaving the party, go back to their dorms, whatever. Everyone was safe, everyone was fine. But then that girl, she ended up not going to that school, but, they still talk about that girl however many years later. If she ended up going to that school, they probably would have, that story would have stuck with her throughout her 4 years there. All the upperclassmen would kind of look at her as that girl who didn't know how to act on a recruiting trip. And, so those stories and those reputations, they stick with you. And it could be for better or for worse, if you go have a great time, get along well with the team, that when you go there the next year, that's how they're going to think about you. So you got to be careful. You got to know how to act, because it is kind of crazy. You might not think it, but it is kind of crazy how much your recruiting trip, the guys or the girls on the team will base their judgments off of you heavily off how you have
it definitely sets the tone for from both perspectives, from the coach's perspective, from the team's perspective, and I guess from the recruit's perspective. So all three perspectives. Right. So it's definitely an interesting dynamic. It's something that you have to think about. It's a fact of, it's just the reality of the situation, unfortunately. So going in and being prepared and informed is definitely the most important thing, as opposed to going in and not expecting certain things. So super, super important. Be prepared in all aspects of the word, especially as far as I'm concerned, making sure you pack the right things. Yeah. It's okay to forget something, obviously, but and you also might want to leave the stuffed animal at home if you sleep with the stuffed animal every night. You might want to leave it at home, but I don't know. Who knows? Oh, and also, most importantly, be prepared to be yourself. Because if you are yourself and you don't feel comfortable with the team or at the school, then you're most likely not going to have a good time, and that's probably not the right fit for you. You can't necessarily give a 100% judgment based on one recruiting trip, but for the most part, it's a pretty good indication, right?
Yeah, and for whatever reason, like I said, that's the stigma around you from your recruiting trip tends to stick with you throughout your time at that school for whatever reason.
For sure. So I had a certain situation. This is a personal recruiting story. I guess you can call it a horror story. It wasn't necessarily one. It was more of a good situation for me. I am wearing this Middlebury shirt. Somebody asked if it's a Middlebury shirt because I got recruited to Middlebury. I went on a recruiting trip there, Brandeis, and Skidmore. And one of the schools that I went to, I was having a great time, loved the team, absolutely loved the coach, and I went up to a random student in the dining hall, and I said, hey, what are your thoughts on this school? I'm not going to mention the school. What are your thoughts on this school? And he said, I absolutely hate it. Don't come here. And at that point, I was, literally. But in my mind, I was like, okay, if somebody's sitting here telling me, they don't know if I'm a recruit. I'm assuming they kind of knew, but they weren't an athlete themselves, saying, I hate the school, don't come here. It was a little bit of a shock for me. I was like, wow, okay. If somebody has such disdain towards the school, I probably won't like it.
Great sign.
So I ended up not going to that school. So you could, by process of elimination, it's not Skidmore. But it was an unfortunate situation for, I'm sure, the school's perspective, but from my perspective, it was very eye-opening. I also had another parent come up to me at Skidmore on a random trip. She had nothing to do with athletics and goes, do kids here do drugs? And I'm like, I know. I don't know. Yeah. So just asking questions. This is the broader perspective, just always asking questions. Make sure that you are informed about what the social life is like, what the mascot is, what the most important thing is with scholarships and playing time. So if you're getting a scholarship to that school, you want to ask questions like, what is the length of the scholarship? Will it have to get renewed every year, or will it be throughout your 4 years at the school? What happens if you get injured? That's a huge thing. Do you have to maintain a certain playing time average or a GPA? What are the academic requirements for the coach as well as the school? Also, what is the off season like? That's a huge one.
Training schedules.
Yes, we've talked about this before in our other Facebook Live events. Division III and most likely Division II are going to have a lesser off season than Division I. But at the same time, you're depending on the level of play at that school for that sport, it's still going to be varying. So make sure you do your research with that and ask questions. Ask away, and make sure you are asking the questions and not your parents. That's a huge thing. Parents get involved when, money gets brought up because obviously you're going to be the one supporting them throughout their time in college. But for any other questions, make sure that you're building the relationship with your coaches. Ask administration questions. Ask the lunch lady questions.
Academic advisors, ask them questions if you meet with them.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. I mean, just based on my one question that I asked a random student, I didn't end up going to that school, which Skidmore was a perfect fit for me, so I'm totally fine with how it played out. But again, questions. Also, make sure you ask what the balance is going to be like between your sport, your school, and your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge thing that you just kind of get caught up in when you're going through the recruiting process, and you don't really take time to think about it just because you want to play a sport in college so badly. But you want, if having a life and doing really well in school is important to you, make sure that you're asking what the academic support is like, if you will have enough time to be doing your schoolwork throughout the season, especially if you're going to be an engineering major or whatever it may be. So, again, questions, and then more questions.
Yeah.
And ask your host a lot of questions because they're there to serve as your guide, but also kind of your mentor in ways. They will provide you with information about their classes. They will provide you information basically about anything that you want. And you really get to know them because you're spending the night with them.
You spend sometimes days depending on the group. And then, so, asking questions, a good way to figure out what questions you want to ask is something you need to do before you get to the school for your visit is research. You got to do research on the coach. Go to our website, Locker Room Talk. Check out their ratings. See if he or her has if they have any reviews from the coach, from the players, whether or not they're good, whether or not they're bad, what they rate high and what they rate low, and if there's any comments, feedback, stuff like that. Also, it looks good to a coach if you ask them a question about how they're doing this season. Say, "Oh, coach, I saw you went 10-4 this year. What do you think about that?" Because that not only gets them talking, gets you guys engaged in conversation, but it lets them know that you're serious about their program, that you took the time to go online to see how they're doing, you follow them, and you're not just there for no reason. You're there because you're actually interested in their school, actually interested in their program. Another great thing to research is, the roster, to see where you stack up with the roster. If they're losing a lot of kids, you could ask the coach, "Oh, how many freshmen do you plan on bringing in? I saw you're graduating 6 seniors this year. Do you plan on only bringing in 6 freshmen, or do you plan on bringing in more or less? What the deal with that is?" And then also look at who's going to be there next year at your position. For, Keirsten played soccer, so a great example is, if you're a goalie, you want to see how many goalies are returning next year. And if you have a couple goalies returning next year, it might be good just to ask the coach, like, "Hey, do you think I have a chance to compete with them for playing time, or do you see me more as someone who is going to have to sit a couple years and prove my skills?" And a lot of times coaches will hopefully tell you the truth. If they say, to be honest, you might have to sit a couple years. If that's something you want to do, that's great. If that's not something you want to do, you might have to look somewhere else. But there's always that issue of, "Oh, is this coach telling me something just so I come to their school, or is he or she being straight up honest with me?" And that's why you go to our website, check out the ratings of the coach, see how honest they are based on their current and former players, what their feedback is. And then that's another opportunity to ask your host and other teammates that are there about the coach, what they think about him, what they think about her.
Oh, definitely. And to speak on your point, we had somebody comment, Simone Collins said, "Ask how they plan to fit you into the game plan / lineup. You may not always like the answer, but better to find out sooner rather than later," which totally plays into what Nick just said. And you can't really stress that enough. Also looking for red flags, getting a vibe, see if the coach is being honest or dishonest. You can check out Locker Room Talk, but you should also be able to get a vibe in general. Looking for small things if they're not committing to you, if they're not saying, "Oh yeah, we really want you at the school next year," maybe you're not their number one recruit. And same for you. If you're not saying things like, "I'm really interested in coming to the school," and so on and so forth, they will recognize that, that's not your number one choice for a school, which is totally fine. You need to be honest, but at the same time, just make sure you're looking for the red flags throughout the entire process.
Another, just going off red flags, something I just thought of is I went on a recruiting trip. I went on 3 overnights during my recruiting process, and one of them, it was a school that I didn't go to. Something that, I kind of thought, oh, this is kind of weird, was I got paired with a host. He took me out. He was a nice kid. I got along with him well, but we didn't hang out with many other baseball kids throughout the entire night. I think I met 2 or 3 other kids on the baseball team, only hung out with one of them a lot. So I kind of asked the host, after the next day, I said, oh, we didn't really go out much with the baseball team. Do you guys usually go out together, or what's the deal with that? And he just said, straight up, that there were a lot of different groups of friends on the team, and they don't often all hang out together, which to me, I thought of that as a red flag, because that's not something that I wanted. So that's another thing to look out for, how the team dynamic is off the field, socially.
That's huge. I feel like you can also tell a lot about how a team is in the locker room. You always get your certain players that like to put their headphones in and kind of do their own thing, but when you walk into the locker room, is everyone pumped up? Do you have music going? Are people joking around? Are they serious? I think all of those dynamics kind of get put forth into how the team is. I mean, I know
there's
for
a
us,
lot of different, scenarios.
Yeah, for our soccer, we had one song that we played before every single game, and it was a very tradition-based type thing over the past couple years that got started, which to me was awesome. I loved it. Yeah. It's something that you can talk about with basically any alumni and say, oh my gosh, remember listening to the song before every single game, even if you weren't on the same team at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's just a bond that you'll always
have. Exactly. And obviously, asking questions, about who they're playing next year or whatever that may be, is super important. But overall, doing your research, asking a ton of questions, and being prepared, those are your 3 things that you want to take away from going into your recruiting trip.
For sure.
Some other fun facts, you can find this all on Locker Room Talk at the NCAA website.
Yep.
There is a difference between an unofficial and an official visit. An unofficial visit is when you and your parents are paying for the visit, and you can take as many unofficial visits as you want for any of the divisions because it's on your dime. And then for Division 1 and 2, and for 3, you can have an official visit. For Division 3, it's not as popular.
Right. Schools just don't have as much money to spend on posting recruits.
It is possible, though.
Right, yeah.
But for Division 1 and 2, you can only take 5 official visits, and you can only visit the school once.
Right.
I know for me, I went to Skidmore twice.
I visited Skidmore twice, did one overnight. I visited a bunch of schools once. Skidmore is the only school that I went back twice, I believe it was now 6 years ago. Crazy to think about that. But so I went to 3 overnights. A lot of kids that I've talked to, whether they were teammates of mine at Skidmore or just other athletes I know, a lot of them picked their school based on the overnight. It's a big, it can tell you a lot about the school, tell you a lot about the team. So like I said, that one school I went out at, I didn't really get a good vibe from the team. It wasn't really a good fit for me. The other overnight I went to, didn't really get along great with my host. He didn't show me around campus. We kind of sat in his dorm a bunch of time, for most of the time. I remember I wanted to ask him about classes. I said, what do you think of the classes here? How are the professors in terms of, dealing with athletics? You have a conflict, and he just told me that he doesn't go to class. So I was didn't get a great vibe from him. Went to Skidmore, really got along with a lot of guys on the team. My host, Jeremy Selecki, I know you're watching. He showed me a great time. I got along with him. Met a lot of guys on the team, had a great time. That's where I ended up going, and that's kind of the story with a lot of athletes. It's probably the best way to figure out if that's a fit, if the school is a good fit for you, and if you're a good fit for that school. So I would suggest doing as many as you can. I know if they're not official visits, they can get expensive. So obviously that's something to take into consideration. But if you can do an overnight at a school, I highly, highly suggest it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even if you're just going to see what a campus looks like, you can still get on campus and ask random kids questions. They'll listen and respond and have a conversation with you if you're not going on that overnight trip, which is completely fine.
Yeah.
You can still end up at that school.
It's pretty cool as a high school kid to go out in college. Oh, this is pretty cool.
See what the experience is like. See what you're going to be walking into. I think finding out the different majors is also another important thing.
Yeah,
at the
exactly.
School.
Yeah.
See what you're interested in. I mean, I changed my major after 2 years, so
right.
It
Yeah.
really depends.
As you mentioned earlier, if you can get to a class, if you want to be a business major, if you could ask the coach, hey, can I go with a kid on the team who takes a business class, so she kind of sit in, see. You can't get too much of a vibe off of one class, but you could see, how the professors are. You can see the class format, if they're huge classes, small classes, things like that.
Yeah. So don't forget to rate your coach at Locker Room Talk.
Yes.
Also, make sure that you are checking out the Recruiting Horror Stories series on our website. We have some from the host perspective.
A lot of funny stuff on
there.
that.
Yeah, a lot of funny stuff. We have some from the host perspective as well as the recruit's perspective. So you can kind of see from the current college athlete, okay, if I'm going to be a recruit, these are the things that I do want to do and I don't want to do. We also have little tips at the bottom and takeaways from the whole story. And I think that's basically it. Go to Locker Room Talk.
Go to Locker Room Talk. Check out our
video.
site. Check out the coaches. Once you're going to an overnight, check out your coach's rating beforehand. See what you're walking into. Rate your coach. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. I think that YouTube. I think that might be it. If you have any questions that we couldn't get to tonight, just leave them in the comments section, and we will reply to you at ASAP. But other than that, I think that's about it.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for joining.
On that note,
rate your coach. Oh, nice. Nice outro.